Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel Dental Cafe. So today we are going to discuss about the Applegate's rule. If you want to know about the Kennedy's classification, I'll share the link. Okay, then begin with the Applegate's rule. Basically, we have a 8 rule. So begin with the first one. So first rule is classification should follow rather than proceed extraction that might alter the classification. It means we have to follow the classification. If we are going for a extraction, then after extraction we'll include that alteration also into the classification. Okay, now try to understand. This is we have a natural dentition. If these are the edentulous area, two dentition, that is 5 and 6, are removed. Now this is a classification Kennedy's class 3 because edentulous area is surrounded by natural dentition both anteriorly and the posteriorly. Detail about the Kennedy classification was already discussed. I will share the link. If we are going to extract second molar, then this alteration we have to include in the classification. So if we are extracting second molar, then this also changes the classification. Now from Kennedy's class 3, this classification is changes to Kennedy's class 2 after extraction of second molar. Kennedy's class 2 is unilateral edentulous area posterior to the remaining natural dentition. Now this is Kennedy's class 2. Previously it is class 3. So any alteration we are doing any extraction, this should change the classification, and this is the rule 1. Now the rule 2. If the third molar is missing, try to read carefully. If the third molar is missing and not to be replaced, it is not considered in classification. If third molar is not present, हमने उसे रिमूव नहीं करा है, हमने एक्सट्रैक्ट नहीं करा है, then we will not include that third molar in classification. Okay, try to understand. As you can see in this figure, third molar is not present. Okay, we are not removing the third molar is already not present, so it is not considered in the classification. Get it? If it is present and we have to extract it, then it is considered in the classification. Until and unless, it will not. Now rule 3. If third molar is present and is to be used as an abutment, then it is considered in the classification. Look at the figure. A third molar is present in this design and we are using it as a abutment for prosthesis fabrication. So this is considered in the classification because third molar is present and we are using it in the prosthesis. So this is considered in the classification. Now the rule 4. If second molar is missing and is not to be replaced, it is not considered in classification. As you can notice, we are talking about the posterior most dentition. First third molar, now second molar. Okay, if second molar is missing and we are not going to replace it, हमने उसको replace नहीं करा है, then it is not considered in the classification. Look at the figure. If this second molar is missing in the patient mouth, patient have a shortened dental arch, then we are not considered this second molar in the classification. Now rule 5. The most posterior edentulous area or area always determine the classification. The most posterior one, the edentulous area or areas, will determine the classification. But if third molar is missing not to be replaced or a second molar is missing not to be replaced, we will not consider in such cases those area as an edentulous area. Okay, They will not alter the classification. Try to understand. Look at the figure. We have some dentitions are missing in anterior and some in the posterior region. This is, we have a posterior most edentulous area as marked in red tick, and the yellow cross one are the anterior edentulous area, as you can very well see in the figure. As per the rule 5, posterior most edentulous area or areas will determine the classification. So in this case, posterior most edentulous area is the molar and the premolar area. So this is a Kennedy's class 3 classification because posterior most edentulous area is surrounded anteriorly and the posteriorly by the natural dentition. Try to understand with the next figure. In next figure, as you can see, we have some posterior and some anterior teeth are missing. So in yellow cross, we have an anterior edentulous area, and in the red tick, we have a posterior edentulous area. Red tick one was the most posterior edentulous area. So this is Kennedy's class 1. Bilateral edentulous area posterior to the remaining natural dentition. And what about the anterior edentulous area? I'll tell you in the later video. Now, rule 6. Edentulous area other than those which determine the classification are referred to as modification spaces and are designated by their number. So, area other than those which determine the classification is called modification spaces. So try to understand rule 6 with the same figure as we are using in the rule 5. So as we all know, we have in red tick we have a most posterior edentulous area, and the yellow cross we have a anterior edentulous area. So posterior most edentulous area will determine the classification. So according to posterior most edentulous area, this is Kennedy's class 3 classification. But the area other than those which determine the classification are called modification spaces. So these two edentulous area are called modification spaces, and we'll number is as area 1 and the area 2. Now, the classification is Kennedy's class 3 with modification number 2 because we have two edentulous spaces in the anterior. Look at the next figure and try to understand. Same in this figure. In cross one we have anterior edentulous area, in the tick we have a posterior. So posterior most will determine the classifications. According to posterior most edentulous area, this is Kennedy's class 1 classification. Again in this we have a two modification spaces. So this is Kennedy's class 1 with modification number 2. Now rule 7. The extent of the modification is not considered. Only the number of edentulous areas, very important point. Only the number of edentulous areas is considered. What this means? Try to understand. So look at the figure. This is, we have a most posterior edentulous area. So it will determine the classification. According to this, it is a Kennedy's class 2 classification. Now we have a various edentulous area in the anterior region, but we have a two edentulous space in the yellow cross, two in the green, but only the number of edentulous area count, not the number of missing teeth. We have to count the number of edentulous area, not the number of missing teeth, because as per the rule 7, only edentulous area is count as a modification space 1, modification space 2, not the number of missing teeth. Whether the missing edentulous area contain 3 or 4 missing dentition, but still it will be counted as 1. So this is, we have a one modification space, then we have a second modification space, and then the third modification space. And missing dentition is 5, but the modification space is 3. So the classification is Kennedy's class 2 with modification number 3. Now, rule 8. Very simple rule. There can be no modification area in class 4. So this is, we have a class 4 in which anterior dentition is missing, or missing dentition is anterior to the remaining natural dentition crossing the midline. This is a very important. Always cross the midline. So try to understand. Look at the figure. We have a some of the dentition missing in the anterior region and some in the posterior. So the posterior most edentulous area will determine the classification as per the rule. So according to posterior most edentulous area, this is Kennedy's class 3. But in anterior, this is, we have a class 4, and which is always present anterior to the all dentition, and that is why there is no modification of Kennedy's class 4, because it always remain anterior, and the classification will be decided by the posterior most edentulous area. So this is considered as a modification space. Now the classification is Kennedy's class 3 modification number 1. I hope all the 8 rules are very easy for you to understand. But still, if you have any problem, any query related to any rule, do comment on comment section. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest video.